The following film contains discussion or depiction of medical discrimination, body horror, ableism, racism, and an occasional flashing light. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey there. Hello. Hey. What can I do for you, doll? Okay, so I'm Rubelio. You may have seen me trending. I emailed earlier regarding getting some documentation stating that I've been vaccinated about COVID-19. I was emailing with somebody named Malaria. It's pronounced malaria. Okay, so I'm an influencer. Gross. Go on. I'm an influencer and I'm going on a New Year's Eve gay cruise and I need to have my COVID test results posted on Insta so people can't call me a COVIDiot or whatevs. What do I have to buy here to get that paperwork? Is there like a threshold? Like, do I get a better one if I spend more? Obviously I want something herbal and organic and, you know, without any like active ingredients. Unlike an actual vaccine, obviously. Those things are all chemicals and poisons if you ask me. Yeah, but I didn't though. Okay, so what should I get? Candle, essential oil, maybe like, do you guys have vaccine lube? I don't know, how about I just give you the money and you give me the certificate? I already have like 30 gallons of lube anyways. Literally cannot deal with having to miss another cruise. I would die, I would die, I would die. Yeah, you still might. So here's the thing. Yeah, is right. This was a trap, a honeypot even. None of these products are real. All of these boxes are empty. This store wasn't even here before this morning. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled even. What? What do you want from me? Have you ever seen Saw? Seen Saw? Ew, yes, why? Well, it's nothing like that. I'll let her explain. Hi. Be not afraid, my child. Just kidding, we're not like angels. Hi, I'm the doctor. Doctor who? No, different one. But I have a funny story about her, but anyway, welcome to the void. I offer my congratulations or condolences, depending on how this goes for you. Let me explain. What's going on? What the literal cuss is going on? I was explaining. Let me explain. You've just entered a void instance. That means that in the near future, you were about to make a choice that would change the timeline in a way that would cause irreparable harm to the world that you live in. The spark at the center of an uncontrollable wildfire. While the rules of this game dictate that we cannot change your fate ourselves, rules are simply just another challenge in the game to master. Here in the void, we do not tell you what will be, only what is. And what it is undeniable. I still don't understand what's happening. Why am I here? Why are you doing this? You're here to learn the truth, and we're here to tell it to you. We needed you to listen, and this is the only way to get you here. We needed to tell you you've been lied to. You've been duped, swindled even, There are powerful individuals driven by greed, endorsed by warped data, and entangled in conspiracies that have been misleading the public about vaccines. I know, that's what I've been saying. That's why I'm here. I don't want to get an untested vaccine that was rushed. And they've been proven not to be safe by thousands of parents and doctors that are blowing the whistle on this entire vaccine industry. No, you misunderstand me. The people you think are exposing the truth are lying, and the people that you think are covering it up are telling you the truth. Honestly, getting you to understand is faster if we could just do like a little brain dump, but sometimes your little human heads go explode. So unfortunately, we're gonna have to do this the analog way. So prepare for your lesson. Please keep your arms and legs away from me because I do not like being touched, and simultaneously direct your attention to the tablet. To understand how and why vaccines came to be, you have to understand the world that was before them. Presented without interruption, this is great production quality. I know, right? I said presented without interruption. This is the history of vaccines. Part 1, the bad place. Vaccines, like most medicines, arose from a need, in this case a dire one. Prior to the advent of vaccines, several highly infectious and incredibly dangerous diseases ravaged the globe. They spread like wildfire, killing and maiming indiscriminately, decimating families, communities, cultures. In their wake, they left their survivors grief-stricken, marred, and disabled. They were killers, and a contagious killer is bad enough in itself. But there's something worse than a killer. Yeah, babies. No, not babies. Baby killers. A killer of babies. Humanity depends on its children to continue itself on, and there were several diseases that were affecting children with devastating results. The first one is measles, an infectious viral disease that causes fever and a red rash on the skin, often in childhood. Measles can also cause blindness, brain swelling, extreme dehydration, pneumonia, and death. Prior to the measles vaccine, nearly all children got measles before they were 15, and around 4 million people in the US were infected every year. Of those infected, every year, 400 to 500 died, 48,000 were hospitalized, and 1,000 suffered from swelling of the brain. Mumps is a viral infection that primarily causes swelling in the salivary glands that are located near your ears. Permanent consequences are rare, but neurological damage and death can occur. Before the mumps vaccine, a lowball estimate is that there were about 186,000 cases a year. Since the vaccine, it's down to a few hundred, a decrease of more than 99%. Although since anti-vaccine advocacy has risen, so have the cases of mumps. Next is rubella, German measles. It's a contagious viral infection best known by its distinctive red rash. Rubella is particularly terrifying because it can cause serious issues with pregnancy. If the fetus even makes it to birth, the consequences may be severe and could still be fatal. Up to 80% of infants born to mothers who had rubella during the first 12 weeks of pregnancy develop congenital rubella syndrome. This can cause growth delays, cataracts, deafness, heart defects, defects in other organs, and intellectual disabilities. For a picture of how terrible this was before the rubella vaccination, a single epidemic of rubella occurring between 1964 and 1965 infected 12.5 million Americans, killed 2,000 babies, and caused 11,000 miscarriages. Today, now that we have a vaccine, less than 10 people in the United States are reported as having rubella every year. Since 2012, all rubella cases are from infections that occurred when the person was living or traveling outside the United States. So, measles, mumps, rubella. Combined, they took millions of lives, maimed millions more, and all of them have been nearly eliminated. And that's all thanks to two things: the MMR vaccine and herd immunity. The MMR vaccine is a single vaccine that protects children against all three of these killers. Herd immunity is when a sufficiently large percentage of a group is immune to a disease, so that if one not immune individual catches the disease, it's unlikely to spread to others. And if it does spread to another person, the virus is very unlikely to find someone else vulnerable to spread to, stopping it in its tracks before it could become an epidemic. The chain of infection will be broken because the disease will encounter too many immune individuals to find a path out of the initial infected group. This is really important because it provides protection for people who are higher risk, such as children that are too young for a vaccine, or people who are immunocompromised following radiation therapy or an organ transplant. Because herd immunity requires a specific amount of the population to be immune to work, only a certain number of people can refuse to vaccinate before it breaks down, and then everyone is again at risk. Unfortunately, the MMR vaccine that keeps those killers at bay is the exact vaccine that anti-vaccine advocates have decided to take the most direct action against, including not giving it to their children. This can, in fact, destroy herd immunity if the movement were to become widespread enough, which, to be clear, is their aim. Okay, well that still doesn't explain, remember, question time is later, the uninterrupted part. So, we know that vaccines work, but how do they work? That's best explained by what is arguably the greatest achievement of vaccines to date, the eradication of smallpox. Smallpox is integral to the story of vaccines because it's through treating smallpox that we discovered all the necessary pieces to put together the puzzle that was vaccination. Smallpox. It's a contagious, disfiguring, and often deadly disease that has affected humans for thousands of years. The major strain of smallpox carries a 30% mortality rate, and towards the end of the 18th century, every year it killed about 400,000 people in Europe. During that time period, a third of all blindness was due to smallpox, and the consequences were devastating in children. 80% of children who get smallpox die. 80%. I'm taking a firm stand on this. That's bad. Definitely bad. Wow, that was so brave of you. Hashtag I'm with her. In the 20th century, between 300 and 500 million people died of smallpox. But we weren't just sitting around with our thumbs up our pussies. Doctors and healers from cultures all around the world were working to prevent or stop smallpox. The best method of that we had at the time was a practice called variolation. It was the method of inoculation first used to immunize individuals against smallpox. This usually meant taking smallpox scabs or ooze from pustules and mushing them up and then rubbing it into scratches made in the skin of the person that you were trying to immunize. Jesus, that's so disgusting. And you also ran the risk of getting whatever other diseases or illnesses that the person with smallpox had, some of which are something you might not recover from. People got syphilis and hepatitis this way. Not cute. To be clear, you also still got smallpox itself through this method, and you were still infectious, but usually the symptoms were milder and you likely wouldn't die. So it was better, but not good. Clearly, we had a poor way of dealing with smallpox at the time, and the stakes were so high. If you want to understand the motivations of the people developing treatments and vaccines at the time, you can safely assume that in some regard, it was personal. Everyone knew or loved someone who directly or indirectly suffered because of these diseases. The issue here was we lacked the understanding and knowledge to even comprehend the cause of disease. So we were restricted into treating symptoms, but prevention was still a pipe dream. After all, people that were variolated were still contagious. They still spread the disease. It was as dangerous as it was gross. And at this point in history, medicine was still just reactive and pre-scientific. We were literally rubbing scabs into each other, but had no clue how or why that even worked. We just prayed to the gods that it kept working. What we were missing, and what was necessary to the advancement of our treatment and prevention of these diseases, was an understanding of microbiology. Think about it. If we don't even know there are microbes, let alone microbes that are viruses, how can we fight them? If we don't know new infections occur through those viruses, how can we prevent them from spreading? Up until the mid-19th century, most people believed in what's called spontaneous generation. that living creatures could just pop out from non-living matter, and that this happened all the time, like fleas are born from dust or that maggots could just crawl out of dead flesh. We thought a lot of wacky stuff back then, but this specifically is important here. So they knew that people gave smallpox to each other, but not the process through which that happened or how to prevent it. That, however, changed fairly rapidly after a few theories became proven science. 1. That once you had smallpox, you were likely never going to get it again. 2. That contracting other poxes, such as a classic cowpox, would produce the same result. No getting smallpox after cowpox, and cowpox had almost no symptoms. So we knew if we could get people to get cowpox before they could get smallpox, then the devastation of smallpox could be mitigated or avoided altogether. 3. That the theory of spontaneous generation was incorrect, and that outside contamination is the cause of infection, that microbes or germs existed. And then finally, 4. That these microbes can cause disease. Put all the pieces of this puzzle together, and we now have the full picture of how a disease like smallpox works. And as of yet, an untested but logically sound theory on how to prevent it. So we did what scientists do. We tested it. In these tests, we used the vaccinia virus, a cowpox, and found that we were right. Vaccinia virus infection is typically very mild and often doesn't cause symptoms in healthy individuals, though if it does, it's like a fever or a rash. Compared to the horrifying effects of smallpox, it was a walk in the bloody park. We had found a way to prevent 400,000 deaths a year with only occasionally mild side effects. Long way away from the doctor telling you that you were sick because you had too much blood, you had to have it slurped up like a frappuccino by a bunch of leeches. Using the vaccinia virus to inoculate people, a process now simply known as vaccination, quickly became widely accepted and replaced the practice of variolation, as it was arguably superior in every way. Development of the vaccine continued over time, improving its effectiveness and reducing side effects wherever possible. If vaccination had not been invented and smallpox was still around, it would currently be killing nearly 5 million people per year. But it's not, because of vaccines. In fact, there have been no new cases of smallpox since 1977. The only known samples are locked away in secured labs in the US and Russia. In 1980, smallpox was declared officially eliminated. Since then, roughly 150 to 200 million deaths have been prevented by that one vaccine. Well, I'm glad that the world isn't like that anymore. But what does that have to do with me and the world we live in now? Nobody around here is dying of smallpox. People aren't saying don't get the smallpox vaccine. People are just saying that the vaccines we have now, like the MMR, aren't safe, and we need more studies done. You're kind of arguing a straw man here with that one. Sorry. We couldn't possibly study these vaccines any more than we have. More than 1 billion children have been vaccinated over the last decade. We know what the effects are, and since their invention, vaccines have saved hundreds of millions of lives and prevented the loss of millions of children. Not forgetting that many of those that wouldn't have died would have had many terrible, lifelong, debilitating conditions. A world without vaccines would be a world wrought with unnecessary and uncontrollable disease and death. We would be burying millions more people every single year. Yeah, that's a dark and dramatic picture you just painted, but it doesn't actually address my concerns. You just gave me the good parts of this history. That's not how things play out in real life. What were the side effects? Who profited? They just rushed out this thing nobody had ever heard of and everybody believed it was safe and just took it and everything was all better? I'm sorry, but I really haven't seen anything here that's gonna change my mind. And you haven't even touched on the biggest effect of vaccines. If you're talking about autism, I'm surprised you even said it, since you've clearly been avoiding it since you started this really ineffective little re-education campaign. And you almost got me too with all the sob stories of kids dying, but smallpox is gone, and unless the motherland decides to go full-on biological warfare on us, it's staying gone. If you want to vaccinate your kids, go ahead, be my guest. But we've actually done our research, and studies show that vaccines cause autism. Doc, I'm about ready to kill this twink, so I think we're at that point now. What point? Not the twink aside point, if you can STFU for a moment, we're at the point where we explain how you've been lied to, how you've been fooled, deluded even. And I'm not talking about by us two bees in this little honeypot today. There are powerful, influential people motivated by financial interest, backed by falsified information, and mired in conspiracy and cover-ups that have been lying to you about the safety of vaccines for decades. And the doc here is going to tell you who they are, the ways in which they conspired to fool the public, and why this all started. You see, to show you the real truth, we have to go back. We have to go right back to the beginning. Oh my God, I got goosebumps. You should start a YouTube channel. No thanks. This mutable, unknowable void pays a livable wage and I get dental benefit. Doc? Oh, right, where were we? To understand a political movement, blah, blah, blah. Okay. To understand a political movement, there are three things you need to understand: its origins, its members, and its motivations. Part 2. You're being lied to. The basis of the spreading wildfire that is sustaining today's anti-vaccine information can be traced back to one man: Andrew Wakefield. On February 28, 1998, Wakefield was the lead author of a study published in The Lancet. In this study, Wakefield proposed a new syndrome called autistic enterocolitis. Wakefield claimed to have found this syndrome when he studied 12 autistic children and raised the possibility of a link between the MMR vaccine and a new form of bowel disease and autism. The authors of this study claimed that the parents of 8 of the 12 children had linked what were described as behavioral symptoms with the MMR vaccine, and reported that onset of these symptoms began within 2 weeks of MMR vaccination after exhibiting strange symptoms related to the bowels. At the same time that Wakefield's report was published in The Lancet, a second piece accompanying it was also published as a commentary on the study itself. The Lancet commentary pointed out that many developmental disorders appear in the first year of life, which is the same time period that vaccination is routinely done. Why point this out? It's explaining a classic example of causation versus correlation. What they're saying was this: that two things happening around the same time is not proof of a link between them. For example, if you look at this graph, you can see a huge correlation between these two trends. You might look at that and think, these are definitely related somehow. Well, this is the number of people per year who die by becoming tangled in their bed sheets. This is the total revenue generated by skiing facilities in the US. Just because something has a strong correlation, 97% in this case, does not indicate that they are linked in any way. To any scientists reading this journal, it was clear what the message was. There was no proof to back a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. The editors of The Lancet were clearly skeptical of the conclusions, so much so that before publication they had multiple meetings to decide if they were even going to proceed with publishing it at all. That sounds wrong. Like, why even publish it then? If there was no evidence, why even do it? Sounds like there's more to this story than you're letting on. Well, you actually just interrupted me, but I'll answer that question for you because I was about to anyway. In the end, they decided that if it somehow was true, that there was no evidence indicating it was, it would be a serious enough issue that it needs to be addressed and studied more, as it would be affecting almost the entire population of children. In the end, they decided they would publish it with a commentary explaining the flaws of the study, but not include it in their usual press release so as to hopefully avoid the media using the study to promote vaccine fears. I bet that went well. So well. Prior to the paper and the commentary being published, the Royal Free Hospital, Wakefield's employer, decided to have a public panel. Including Wakefield, 5 doctors, each with different views on the Lancet paper, were called into a panel. And they agreed beforehand that until there was evidence supporting Wakefield's claims, they would advise that parents continue with the MMR vaccine schedule. But Andrew Wakefield went rogue and decided to say that they needed to break up the MMR vaccine immediately into 3 separate vaccines administered annually over 3 years, which suggested to the public that the MMR vaccine was safer when split up, which is not supported by anything, not even Wakefield's own study. Because this was all said in a press conference held before the paper was even published, people wouldn't have a chance to also read the commentary about the paper's many flaws. Basically, what Wakefield ensured was that people would only see the correlation, and then he used his platform to further promote it as causation to the media. Okay, so why is doing it in 3 single vaccines so unreasonable? Why not be cautious? These are kids' lives. Excellent interruption. Here's the thing. There wasn't a single vaccine on the market at the time, which meant that his instructions to parents were that they needed to cease vaccinations of measles, mumps, and rubella. That alone could cause hundreds of thousands of new cases a year. Again, maiming and killing children, which I think we can all agree is bad. I mean, I agree to that, but I'm not sure you two do. She literally just said it. She said she did. She said it first. Can we please watch the film though? I'm kind of invested right now. Ugh. Yeah, if I have to be here, let's just get this over with. Of course, as predicted, the media blew this up the next day. They called for immediate action and began issuing warnings about the MMR vaccine. Wakefield's public announcement was the spark, given airtime and oxygen by the media, causing a wildfire that is still burning today. We can plainly see the effects of this misinformation, as every time anti-vax sentiment spread in a community, disease and death follow in tow. In the years following the Lancet study, MMR immunization fell from 91.5% of children by the age of 2 to a low of only 79% in 2004. The annual number of reported measles cases went from 37 people in 2004 to 667 people in 2014, a 1,700% increase. Presented with this kind of information, why would people still believe him in his study? What makes parents choose not to believe their doctors and decide not to vaccinate their children? Fear. And what Andrew Wakefield created was a scientific disguise that to a lot of people added legitimacy to those fears. Fear that something would happen to their children, that they were the only ones who could protect them. Andrew Wakefield to them was a hero, a protector, a whistleblower. And now the truth was finally coming out. But as it would soon come to light, the truth that would come out was about the secrets that Andrew Wakefield himself was hiding. And he had a lot of them. Here. What is this for? It's for tea, honey. A Doctor Without Borders. In 2004, stone cold hottie Brian Deere, a British investigative reporter, best known for inquiries into the drug industry, medicine, and social issues, released a report on his in-depth investigation into Andrew Wakefield. In this piece, Deere revealed a few things that fully discredit Wakefield's claims, as well as reveal his hidden motivations, concealed even from those he worked with in his study. These are those secrets. Conflict of interest. In August 1996, just 2 years before publishing his 1998 study in The Lancet, Wakefield was hired by a lawyer, Richard Barr, who was trying to build a lawsuit against vaccine makers. Barr paid Wakefield the equivalent of $750,000 today to help him build his case, and add legitimacy to his claims. Wakefield's co-authors on the paper were unaware of this contract. It was only a month after that payment that he sent a letter to the government's chief medical officer urging against the MMR vaccine. The study claimed that 8 out of 12 children had been diagnosed with autism soon after getting the MMR vaccine. It described these children as a consecutive series of admissions to the hospital where Wakefield worked. That was a flat-out lie. Deere's expose revealed that all 12 children and their parents were referred to Wakefield by Barr, the lawyer who was paying Wakefield to conduct the study, and he was trying to use that study as evidence in a monetary lawsuit against vaccine makers. He fabricated all the key evidence in his study. Not only were the children not randomly selected by circumstance, as Wakefield claimed, Wakefield also falsified data on all 12 of the children in his original study. Many of the children in the study had not been diagnosed with autism. Some had never been diagnosed with anything at all. All the subjects in his study had their case histories altered, omitted, or misrepresented to fit Wakefield and Barr's narrative. The kind of things they'd remove or alter were whether or not they ever actually had bowel issues that allegedly made the children autistic, or if the kids were displaying behavior indicative of autism before even getting the MMR vaccine. After obtaining the hospital's records through the lawsuit Wakefield filed and comparing them to Andrew Wakefield's study, the changes he made to them are staggering. Unethical treatment of the children in the study. On top of all of that, Wakefield had been found to have conducted invasive and distressing procedures on these children, procedures that were done without approval from his hospital's ethics board. Young children had undergone unapproved procedures such as endoscopies and lumbar puncture. Conflict of interest, again and more. A year before making his claim that the MMR vaccine was unsafe, Wakefield filed a patent claim for a safer vaccine for measles, one that would have profited him greatly once he discredited the perfectly safe MMR vaccine. In fact, after the initial press conference where Wakefield went off script in order to promote his lies, Wakefield met with a venture capitalist, one of the parents in the lawsuit, and a finance officer about forming a company for his vaccine called Immunospecifics Biotechnologies Limited to start patenting and selling his future standalone measles vaccine that would fill the gap after the misinformation about the MMR vaccine took hold and parents stopped using it. Wakefield predicted he could make more than $43 million a year from diagnostic kits for his newly minted condition, autistic enterocolitis, partly by using the legal system to force testing using his new test that only he had. I knew it. Oh, did you? What did you know? That you'll do anything to discredit a man who has spent his whole life trying to give children a normal life. Why is it only this one reporter who is saying all this stuff? And what about everyone else involved in the study? If the study is so bad, why is nobody else speaking up about it? It's not like he worked alone. You're right, he didn't. And following Deer's expose, 10 other people who worked on the paper released this statement, hoping to clear up the confusion and misinformation about what the paper was saying it found in the original study. They said, "We wish to make it clear that in this paper, no causal link was established between MMR vaccine and autism as the data were insufficient. However, the possibility of such a link was raised and consequent events have had major implications for public health. In view of this, we consider now is the appropriate time that we should together formally retract the interpretation placed upon these findings in the paper." Basically, they're saying there was no proof the MMR vaccine caused autism, and people thinking there was has fucked up public health. We take it back. The editor who approved the publishing of the article has now said he would never have published the paper had he known the truth of Andrew Wakefield's motivations, which he did not, because Wakefield concealed and lied about them. When presented with an opportunity to prove that he could reproduce his study under supervision, he unsurprisingly would not. In January 2010, the General Medical Council Disciplinary Panel, which had sat and heard evidence against Wakefield for 148 days over 2.5 years, finally found a long list of charges against him proven. That the GMC has found Wakefield guilty of unapproved and unnecessary invasive tests, including spinal taps on young children, is the most damning indictment possible. The findings of failure to declare financial interest are a secondary consideration. Basically, yes, he had messed up motivations and that's super unethical, but it's a lot more unethical to do unapproved and totally not needed tests on children as part of an experiment. On February 2nd, 2010, The Lancet formally retracted Wakefield's 1998 paper. The retraction states, "The claims in the original paper that children were consecutively referred and that investigations were approved by the local ethics committee have been proven to be false." Wakefield, predictably, has since denied all claims against him, and as of posting this, has not responded to my request for an interview. Although Wakefield has filed several libel suits, they have all been dropped. Kind of hard to prove that somebody is lying about you when they're telling the truth. And given that his libel suit against Deer was probably one of the bigger mistakes in his life, I hope he learned his lesson on that one. Studies have shown that there is no link between children who begin to show signs of autism and hospitalizations for inflammatory bowel disease. Dozens of studies have been done with different methodologies on every possible variation, MMR in autism, MMR in IBS, vaccine ingredients like thimerosal in autism, and every single study has proven Andrew Wakefield's falsified claims to be just that, lies. But did the media cover these later studies the way they covered Wakefield's? Did they throw up warnings and retractions for all the fear-mongering headlines they profited off of? Of course not. Because fear is what sells. The goal of mainstream media is to make money by reporting on events, not prevent disease, and that has been made abundantly clear. There is something to be said in how much liability the media must take in presenting this information. In science, studies like Wakefield's don't get much notice since they're often false. It's disproven and then we move on. It's not sensationalized. Science is built on a foundation of disproving old theories when they're incorrect. The media has a vested interest in presenting and maintaining the most sensationalized version of science, both in terms of ad revenue and maintaining their position as arbiter of public safety. If the media consistently admitted when they were wrong or lied in their reporting on science, they would no longer be able to sell those stories, and they'd lose money. In various interviews the media has published, Wakefield blamed conspiracy for why his work has been so widely debunked and held as unethical and bad science. They gave him and his lies airtime and a platform even after he was proven to have been a con man. One of the more frustrating parts is this. Andrew Wakefield is guilty of scientific misconduct, which is the exact thing anti-vaxxers are accusing the medical and scientific industries of being right now. Everything anti-vaccine advocates believe about big pharma is unproven, but it is proven and demonstrably true of Andrew Wakefield, whom they do believe. In the years after his separation from the hospital, Wakefield did what a lot of disgraced British peeps do. Move to the US, where they have the right and freedom to lie and spread misinformation all you want. Which is how, in 2016, Wakefield produced Vaxxed, From Cover-Up to Catastrophe. I don't have much to say about Vaxxed, and though I could go through and argue all the points made in the documentary, I won't. They're all based on falsified information, lies, and emotion. If you're interested in an in-depth, comprehensive rebuttal to all the lies told in Vaxxed, you can find them in the links below. There's no need for me to reiterate them. Plus, it would take another 5 hours. But what I do want to discuss is an often overlooked aspect of this lie that vaccines cause autism. What I have to talk about is how repugnant this documentary is when it comes to discussing autism and autistic people. Throughout the entire film, Vaxxed presents and outright calls autistic children damaged.
Out there's millions of me's, there's millions of polytomies with vaccine-damaged children. I am telling you this because I do not want you to live the life that I've led. I do not want you to go through the pain. I do not want to see you suffer or your family suffer. That is why I'm telling you. I have no other reason to tell you about it. It's not my concern.
It presents having an autistic child as something no parent would want and should actively try to prevent. And it at no point truly focuses on the children themselves.
I just cannot imagine what it will be like if we really do face a future in which half the children born end up on the autism spectrum. I mean, it will be so disruptive of the school system. There'll be so little money to be able to spend on the normal children to help them, to bring them up and to educate them. We're just going to have extremely sick children and parents that will be so distracted by the challenge of bringing up these children that are so sick that our society will not be able to focus on anything else.
The implications of that for our country, for our competitiveness as a nation, for our economy are massive. They must know, and they do know, that there's a national emergency.
I mean, this is going to be a complete catastrophe if we just let it happen.
Many autistic people see their autism as a fundamental part of who they are. And referring to someone as damaged because you believe they aren't normal is beyond disrespectful.
It used to be 1 in 10,000, and now it's 1 in more than 250 kids that are being damaged in this country that are autistic. Now, those kids are going to grow up. They aren't going to die. It's not like a lot of diseases where they get infected and they drop dead. They're going to live to be 50, 60 years old. Now, who do you think is going to take care of them? It's going to be us, all of us, the taxpayers. And it's going to cost, I think, as you said, Ms. Maloney, trillions of dollars.
Raising your child to believe that they are broken and damaged, that the way they are is a mistake, is a horrible way to treat a person. If you want to see a child that has actually truly been injured, you don't have to look any further than the household of a parent that would talk about their child like this for any reason. The documentary intends to use emotions to sway you. And it worked on me, just not in the way they intended. It made me angry, and it made me want to do this even more. The people in the film are all part of a larger group of anti-vaccine advocates, but they're not representative of most people who have been influenced by Wakefield's lies. Most people who fear vaccines are not like these people. They aren't anti-vaxxers. You're really trying to downplay the amount of us there are? I bet there aren't any true Scotsmen either. If they aren't anti-vaxxers, who are they? What a ridiculous, convenient, and unplanned segue into members. There are two groups of people being lumped together here under the term anti-vaxxer, and I'd like to make a distinction between them. We have anti-vaccine advocates, and then we have vaccine-hesitant people. Anti-vaccine advocates, also called anti-vaxxers, are people that believe that vaccines cause harm and will most likely refuse vaccination for themselves and their children. Vaccine-hesitant people are people who have fears and concerns about vaccines due to widespread misinformation and sensationalized media coverage. They are likely to maybe postpone or delay vaccination out of fear, but not to outright refuse it. If their doctor suggests it, they're likely to do it. Now, this isn't obfuscation and distancing language like the terms race realist or gender critical are. This is an actual distinction. And going forward, when discussing members of the anti-vaccine movement, I'll be discussing people who are outwardly anti-vaxxers, not the vaccine hesitant or the under-vaccinated. When I say anti-vaxxer, who do you picture? Most people would picture a woman who is white, middle-aged, mother, conservative, a classic Karen, if you will. But the truth is a little more nuanced than that. Kind of. 3/4 of anti-vax Facebook group members are women, and the quarter of them that are men are even less likely to post than they are to be members. Anti-vax group discussions often extend to other topics like chemtrails, media censorship and cover-ups, vaccines as genocide, Bill Gates trying to chip you like a lost chihuahua. When you examine the issues anti-vaccine activists are discussing, it's clear that they view vaccination as institutional oppression, and social media is their outlet to vent their moral outrage and fight the man. Which man? Bill Gates, anyone that owns a pizza parlor, media, Democrats. So when you break it down, here's what we know. You're more likely to be an anti-vaccine advocate as a woman, but more likely to be vaccine hesitant as a man. Political party has little impact on vaccine hesitancy, but education levels do. There are higher rates of vaccine hesitancy for those with less than a high school education. Unvaccinated children tended to be white, to have a mother who was married and had a college degree, to live in a household with an annual income exceeding $75,000, and to have parents who expressed concerns regarding the safety of vaccines and indicated that medical doctors have little influence over vaccination decisions for their children. Unvaccinated children were more likely to be male than female. Now, we have to be careful not to confuse groups that are under-vaccinated with groups that are anti-vaccine and unvaccinated. Under-vaccinated children are likely to be children whose parents want them to receive preventative health care like vaccines, but can't afford it. They tended to be Black, have a younger, unmarried mother without a college degree, to live in a household near the poverty line, and to live in a central city. Whereas unvaccinated children are likely to be the children of parents with vaccine doubt. If you wanted to take a wild stab in the dark at which children in California classrooms have bogus vaccine exemptions, look no further than middle-class white kids in private school. These differences underline the role of race and class privilege in the anti-vaccine movement, but they don't explain it all. Because some people really do have a reason to fear that the government is doing something surreptitiously harmful. Racialized and disabled people have often been the targets of medical discrimination and experimentation. And for those that are vaccine hesitant, it is less about having unscientific anti-vaccine sentiments, but rather a distrust of the government institutions with a history of actively treating patients of color unethically. A few examples, and there are so many, but I'm just going to name a few that are relevant here. In the 1930s, Canadian government officials tested tuberculosis vaccines on impoverished Indigenous people instead of fixing the conditions that spread the disease. In the 1940s and 1950s, malnourished Indigenous children served as unwitting subjects in nutritional experiments conducted by the Canadian government. Tactics included withholding vitamin supplements and milk rations, withholding dental care, and feeding them food that wasn't legally sold elsewhere in Canada. Then, they watched them suffer and did nothing but record the results. From 1932 to 1972, researchers from the United States Public Health Service and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention purposely didn't treat Black patients infected with syphilis, again, watching them suffer and recording the results. They told them they would help them, and then waited for them to die so they could see how it happened. There's a lot to be said about the fact that there are actual instances of forced vaccinations and harmful medical experiments on people of color, yet anti-vaccine advocates rely on fabricated conspiracy theories to prove that the government is trying to control and harm people through vaccines. Now, I can't advocate that causation does not equal correlation and then say anti-vax people are white supremacists because they don't discuss something. But I do have an hypothesis that I'd like to test out. I'd very much like to see what a mostly white anti-vaccine Facebook group would answer when asked what demographic of people has the most reason to fear vaccines. Hold on, I'll ask. Thanks, babe. You're welcome. Sending to you now. Well, that answers that. Motivation. There are a lot of misconceptions about the motivations of anti-vaccine advocates, but if I may generalize what I've been seeing online in the past few years, anecdotally of course, a lot of it is really just the following. This is what it seems like people really think anti-vaxxers' motivation might be. Anti-vaxxer stupid, no science, poor people know no stuff. Republicans love Sky Dad, hate Science Mom, women no use brain to make baby health. We have to cut it out. It's not true. And it's not helping. There are plenty of reasons why a person would be an anti-vaxxer, and it's not because they're women or poor or anti-science or gullible or conservative. There are three main reasons why the majority of anti-vaxxers believe and promote misinformation about vaccines: identity, fear, and profit. Identity. Try for a moment to picture how it would feel to be a crusader against an evil government that is trying to hurt your children. A government that is eroding your right to make decisions in your child's life. Imagine that you know this to be true, and that almost everyone else around you was just taking everything the government said at face value, even though you'd seen proof yourself countless times that you were right. You've pored over YouTube videos, articles, studies, documentaries with whistleblowers and doctors, and they've all confirmed what you already knew to be true. That children are getting sick, children are dying, and people are doing this to them intentionally, and they're covering it up. And the only resistance to that is you and a small group of like-minded people. What do? What's your moral obligation here? Well, you do what any main character in a film would do. You Aaron Brockovich. You save the children, become a hero. And not only are you a hero, you're one of the chosen few who are truly awake, a wolf amongst sheep. You're different, and you're special. And now you know it. Imagine the ego boost, the sense of self-worth and purpose that something like that could provide. Imagine how that would become such an integral part of your identity, your life, who you are. Children are being targeted, and you and people like you are going to save them. And the people that aren't like you, they sneer at you, they look down on you, they call you stupid, they call you ignorant, they call you crazy, they tell you that you're uneducated, which is ridiculous because you've probably actually put more time into actively researching vaccines in a week than any random pro-vaccine person would in their entire lifetime. When you try and educate people around you, they don't listen, or they turn you away, or they mock you, or they cut you out of their lives, until all the people left in your life who treat you like you're not an idiot are the people in your anti-vaccine group on Facebook. They become your new support system, your new family. And maybe, in a moment where your confidence wavers, when you realize what you've lost because of the impact that your anti-vaccine advocacy has had on your life, you might begin to question if it was worth it. Who is left to protect when you've pushed everyone away? So you go online. You make a post in your anti-vaccine Facebook group. You ask, am I wrong? I don't want to lose my family. I don't want to be treated like this anymore. And immediately, you have dozens or hundreds of people confirming that not only are you not to blame, you're the victim. And that not only are you in the right, you're brave. And they're trying to censor you because they're all brainwashed. They tell you that you have the right to be afraid. And you are. You all are. You're perpetually terrified. Fear. You're scared for your children, and you're scared for the children whose parents are filling them with poison and chemicals and chips, both GMO chocolate and micro. They're ruining their children's lives by the millions, and it's up to you to stop them. It's fear that got you here, and it's fear that will keep you here. Fear that creeps up in the brief moments that your steel-strong resolve falters and tells you that even if you were wrong about vaccines, it's too late now. Fear that whispers to you that if you were to admit that maybe you were wrong, you'll be ridiculed and dismissed. That if you were to backtrack, you would look like the biggest fool. Someone that threw their relationships away for nothing, for lies. That now that your entire community and identity is tied to this ideology, if you were to start suddenly espousing pro-vaccine beliefs, you would lose not only your community, but your sense of self-worth. Your sense of self. You've been so scared and so alienated and so angry for so long. And that's only going to be reinforced when someone online tells you that you're anti-science, or you see a meme literally joking about how parents of unvaccinated children cause their children to die young. And you've already done your research. You've read so much information. Somebody sending you a link to a study that was conducted by the same government that is brainwashing people using rigged studies as pro-vaccine propaganda is only proving your point. The fact that they sent you that propaganda is proof in itself that they are the ones that are brainwashed. So if you understand where they're coming from, why are you so anti-vaccine? You can just say pro-vaccine. It's like when people say anti-Antifa. You can just reduce your fraction and say pro-fascist or pro-vaccine. Okay. How can you be so pro-vaccine that you'd set up a whole sting operation when you clearly know that anti-vaccine advocates aren't trying to hurt anyone? Why can't they just believe whatever they want? If I told you right now that I was part of a group of people that believed radiation didn't cause cancer, what would you say? I'd say that that's your business and you should believe whatever you want. Okay. Now what if I told you that in order to prove radiation doesn't cause cancer, I have in my possession a small device that emits enough radiation to give most people cancer if we're in the same room for a few moments. And I'm leaving it on wherever I go. And that it's been on since the moment you walked into this store. There's a huge difference between making people sick because you didn't do something and making people sick because you did something on purpose. That's totally true, but not getting vaccinated is intentional when it's coming from an anti-vaxxer because it's something they're doing as an act of defiance and resistance. It's a conscious decision they have to make and usually requires them to actually go get an exemption note from any doctor who will sign one. And that note in the hands of their unvaccinated kid, when they send it into schools, can be exactly like sending them in with a cancer ray. Fine, if that's true and anti-vax beliefs are spreading like a wildfire and it ends with people suffering, show me. Show me all these people anti-vaccine advocacy is hurting, because with all your talk and all your bluster, you haven't shown me shit. All I've seen is people used to die and they don't anymore. Sounds like these diseases just aren't that bad these days, so vaccines aren't that important. Sounds like you're saying they're coming from a place of fear, but they don't seem as scared as you are. One, that's a good point. It's wrong, but I like how you got there. They're scared, sure. Being scared isn't necessarily a bad thing. But when somebody is sensing danger where there is none, and not detecting any danger where it's abundant, that fear becomes harmful to them and everyone around them, because fear causes extreme reactions. Reacting to fear when danger is present is justified and a necessary function to keep yourself alive. But if people kept picking up their children and running into traffic because they think the sidewalks are unsafe, we have to do something about that, preferably before someone actually gets hurt. So just take away people's rights because of something you think they might do? What is this, the Minority Report? If they're literally already standing in the middle of the metaphorical road screaming, "Get off the sidewalk, it's poison," then no. We're not using divination, don't be dramatic. Actually, no. What's dramatic is you setting up a whole freaky fake store just so you can sit for Big Pharma and line their pockets. It's pathetic. Okay, enough. Every single time one of your points is countered, all you do is pivot and redirect and project and obfuscate, and I am tempted to spread my mind across the space in between us and pick you apart, atom by atom, right now. I could do it. I could just disperse you. Sorry about that. Little bit of a glitch. Apologies. Where were we? Oh, right. Lining the pockets of those profiting off of healthcare. Yeah, I was just trying to say that. No, of course, I understand. I'll be happy to answer that query. Query. Profit. To deny profit as a motive for vaccine production would be ridiculous. We live under capitalism. You cannot separate profit from a for-profit industry like pharmaceuticals. But there's a difference between investigating and following a money trail to discover conflicts of interest and using profit as a motive to discredit the product itself. Just because their goal is to make money doesn't mean vaccines don't work or aren't safe. The fact that you're being charged for a medicine doesn't impact how well it works. Insulin is ridiculously priced in the US, and nobody's going to argue that it doesn't work. I mean, argue against private companies owning patents to medicine if you want, I'll agree with you. But it's really not the gotcha it seems to be at first glance. If an FDA-approved medicine works, it'll be cleared in studies. And then, if it's approved, they sell it. With that out of the way, let's talk about Big Pharma's profits. Compared to ongoing treatment for viruses and diseases, vaccines simply aren't as profitable. There are so many factors that make vaccine production difficult and less profitable than other treatments. Live vaccines are hard to manufacture, and they have very rigorous standards for the safety protocols, which honestly just makes them a pain to produce. And even when you get to the old free market with your vaccine to sell it, they're often bought by public agencies at capped prices. A market with high production costs, low market prices, and heavy regulation is simply harder to manage. It's a bit of a nightmare. The pharmaceutical company Wyeth stopped making the flu vaccine because the margins were so low, and it just wasn't worth it for them to go through all the effort. Using the argument that the reason why vaccines are recommended is because doctors are in bed with Big Pharma just doesn't hold up. It's a lot more profitable to offer a constant treatment with multiple visits or prescriptions over someone's lifetime than 1 or 2 dose vaccines when they're kids. And if everyone in the world was vaccinated, they wouldn't even be able to sell their vaccines anymore, as a lot of those viruses would be completely eradicated. Running your own company out of business is not a profitable business plan, and if it's a conspiracy, it's a really bad one. Hell, it would have been more profitable to just do what Wakefield said and charge for the MMR vaccine to be 3 separate vaccines with 2 doses each, years apart. Which is why Andrew Wakefield wanted them separately, so we could charge people for them. We know people have tried to profit off of vaccines, and it's people like Wakefield, you know, the same people anti-vaccine advocates hold up as virtuous whistleblowers fighting against profiting off of vaccines. Your claim is true, in part. There are people who make a very substantial amount of their income by selling medicine that actually is ineffective or dangerous. But again, it's not who you think. Right now, there are places like this, where you can go and buy some oil or tea or tinctures or crystals that give you a false sense of safety and protection against illness. And those are the places anti-vaxxers are likely to turn to for their healthcare after turning away from proven medicines. And in order for a business like this to run and be profitable, their customers need to not trust doctors and scientists. They need to be putting all their trust in them. There are people on the internet who will do healing circles and prayer devotionals to keep you safe and healthy, and all of that for only the low price of way too much money to be spending on literally nothing. And things like homeopathic remedies don't even need FDA approval. They don't meet anywhere near the level of scrutiny a vaccine does. And while vaccines aren't big moneymakers, the alternative medicine market is an $80.83 billion industry, even though only 1/3 of the treatments have been tested. This includes things like homeopathic remedies and various supplements, powders, teas, products labeled and marketed as natural, safe, and effective alternatives to approved prescription and non-prescription products that have never even been through an FDA evaluation for safety or effectiveness. And while vaccines are slated to be making $81 billion by 2027, alternative treatments are set to be making nearly $300 billion, or 3.5 times the amount. If pharmaceutical companies merely wanted to increase their profit margins, they would stop manufacturing vaccines and focus on only developing and selling drugs and alternative medicines. You act like all of this is so obvious, like you do know everything about everything. Thank you, I do. Pretty much literally, actually. If you know everything then, and you're right and everyone else is wrong, why are so many people seeing the effects of vaccines for themselves? How would so many people all have reactions right after the vaccine? Maybe Andrew Wakefield was lying, but that doesn't make him wrong. Are you saying that all the parents of vaccine-injured kids are lying? Or do you honestly believe that people don't know their own bodies or their kids' bodies, but you do? You two know everyone better than they know themselves. No, just because you're not telling the truth doesn't mean you're lying. If you believe something to be true and it isn't, that's just called being wrong. Let's be clear, it's okay to be wrong and it's understandable. Finding the truth in a world full of misinformation, clickbait, and lies is like trying to untangle your headphones after they've been in your pocket for 1.2 seconds. If that's true, whose fault is that? Because it's not parents who are responsible for the government and the media and the doctors telling different stories. You're right. Jinx, buy me some Coke. But seriously, you're absolutely right. Science has not caught up to social media in terms of properly communicating information and discoveries. It's all paywalls and jargon and terms that people wouldn't understand unless they were also part of that specific field of study. And then most pro-vaccine social media is just memes and hate and calling people stupid. And if a bunch of your friends are anti-vaccine, you'll probably trust your friends and stories they've heard more than you would trust a paper you can't access or read, or random strangers online telling you that you're an idiot. And let's be real, you're never even going to see that scientific paper on social media anyways. A tweet will be shared hundreds of thousands more times than a scientific paper, which means most non-scientists get most of their information filtered through social media or the media. It's like broken telephone mixed with Russian roulette. The time people have is precious, and the benefits to becoming informed about every topic so that you can read every scientific article and understand it is just really not worth it to most people, nor is it likely to be anything but frustrating and fruitless. For you. Oh, you're so annoying. Okay, I get it. Vaccines are great. People are misinformed. Andrew Wakefield was a hideous shitlord trash troll, but we can't do anything about it. I have my own shit going on. Why should I care? Why should you care? Why should you care? I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? Come up to the tablet. Ask me again. Ask me why you should care that people are being tricked into harming themselves. Because you seem real fucking concerned about it when the conspiracy was about people you didn't like, when it confirmed your worldviews. Now that you have solid proof, of which you failed to counter, might I add, you want to ask me why you should care? Oh no. What's happening? She's going full boomer. You look around you at your little bubble in the world and you see healthy people walking around and enjoying their lives, and you don't even think for one single moment about the fact that if it weren't for the thing you advocate against, this world you see wouldn't have ever existed. You'd be living in a world where disease and pestilence touched everything and left nothing but bodies and broken families in its wake. The only reason people aren't dying in droves is not enough people are irresponsible enough to not get vaccinated. You use your privilege as blinders so you can stay as ignorant and comfortable as you need to pretend like you're not a fucking hypocrite. You don't even need a virus to make people sick, because just looking at your smug little face right now makes me want to throw up. Doctor? I know this isn't helpful. I know that screaming at someone through a screen doesn't do anything but make me feel better. But maybe that's good enough for me right now. Feel better? Oh, Hecate, yeah, I needed that. That was good. I'd really like to leave now. I kind of actually hate you both a lot. Please, thanks. Wait, don't you want your COVID vaccination certification? That's why you came, right? Great joke. Can I go now? You mean, may I go? Kidding. You might think I'm evil, but I'm not like grade 2 teacher gatekeeping bathroom breaks evil. No, did I forget to mention the part that like, it's all part of the deal? The loophole in the do not interfere rule works out that we can lure you in here and give you all the information we like to try and sway you, but we have to tell you the truth. And in order to get you in here, we had to promise a certification. It's a calculated risk, and I guess if we didn't prepare you enough, that's on us. No shit. Okay, cool. I kinda love you too. So, gimme cruise time. Yeah, and we will. Next week, in part 2, COVID-19. Oh, you gotta be freaking kidding me. So tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, all new bat disease.